Good morning, welcome to day 12 of Vlogmas. So it's Tuesday the 12th of December and it's a lovely sunny day here today, actually another really bright day like yesterday. We had a lot of rain in the night, it actually woke me up, it was so heavy. But the sky seemed to have cleared now and I'm looking outside and the skies are blue with some white fluffy clouds. So that is quite nice, and it's actually a bit milder today too, which is nice too because it was still quite chilly yesterday. But anyway, I've just got back from the school run, so I thought I'd come on now and catch up with you before I get on with my day. So I launched straight into what Elf was up to in the night. And when we came down this morning, we found that Elf had set up a little beauty salon. So he'd fashioned himself a little beauty counter, which was quite sweet. He seemed to have borrowed the lid from one of my baking tins, which is quite a Christmassy lid actually, so he chose well there. And on the little counter, he'd set out a few of my daughter's sort of children's nail polishes and little children's makeup set too. And it looked to be a very popular beauty salon because there are a lot of dolls and Barbies all lining up. It looked like princesses had come from all over the land. Lots of Barbies, it was very popular. Elf looked like he was going to be rushed off his feet there. So my daughter helped him get through all of his clients and they all seemed to be quite happy with the service and they liked Elf's salon. So yeah, it was quite a sweet one this morning, slightly smaller scale than what he did yesterday. But yeah, quite a nice start to the day to find he'd been sort of dabbling in a new enterprise there. So that is what Elf was up to this morning. And then I'll share what I'm wearing next. And like I mentioned, it's a little bit milder today. So I've gone for a slightly more lightweight top, although it still is a bit cosy with the higher neck and a pinafore on top. So the top is another of my Freya tops from the stretch book by Tilling the Buttons. I have got quite a few of them and they are great for layering at this time of year. So they're definitely a staple in my winter wardrobe. And the one I've gotten today is quite a lightweight one. And I made it in a really lovely fabric, which is this Meat Milk Tencel Modal Rib Knit fabric. It's lovely, it's got this really nice rib texture to it. And it's quite like a drapey fabric with a lovely sheen to it. And it's very, very stretchy as well, definitely stretchier than your average sort of cotton jersey fabric. And I've got this fabric, I bought this fabric in a few colourways because I really like it. As well as this Freya top, I bought the sort of dark red colourway and I made an orage dress by Deer and Doe out of that. And then I had just enough fabric left over from the orage dress to squeeze out a little orage top, which I haven't worn a lot, but it is quite Christmassy, so I should really get that out over the next week or two. The dress and the top are both quite Christmassy actually. And then I also more recently bought the black colourway of this fabric and I made this pattern here. I made a Zoe dress by True Bias. I made this dress, only a shorter version, the black colourway. And I haven't worn that dress yet because it's more of a summery one, but I've got it sort of stashed away, ready to get out next summer. And actually, this fabric, when I made this Freya top, when I made it, I had just enough fabric left over to squeeze out the tank top version of the Zoe tank and dress. And I loved that tank. I wore it loads this summer. And then I somehow managed to get a stain on it right at the front in a really obvious place. And I tried loads of different ways of getting the stain out, loads of different stain removers. But it just wouldn't budge and it was quite an obvious stain and it was a dark stain on like a light coloured top. So I was really disappointed because the top was kind of spoilt. So actually a few weeks ago I decided, because I love the top so much, I would buy a bit more of the fabric and recreate it. So yeah, here's my newer Zoe tank with no stain on the front, all nice and brand new. I haven't actually worn it other than just trying on to check it fits. The nice thing is I got this fabric from Minerva, which is where I bought all my different colourways. They've got quite a good range there. And the nice thing I think about Minerva is you can buy fabric in 10 centimetre increments. I think the minimum you can buy is 0.5 of a metre. But then if you want, you can buy, say, 0.7 of a metre, rather than having to kind of then bump up. If you need somewhere between a half metre and a metre, you don't have to bump up to the metre. You can buy somewhere in between. So I think I've laid out all the pattern pieces for the Zoe tank and just figured out how the smallest amount of fabric I'd need to buy to be able to squeeze this out. And I bought that amount of fabric, which was quite nice. So yeah, I made this up. And one thing I found was really good making this top that was really useful was instead of using sort of standard sew-all thread, I bought like a matching thread in Mariflex thread, the stretchy thread. And it made it a lot easier to finish all the little seams, finish all the bands around the neck and the arms, because you can see there you just can stitch in a straight stitch, because I was a little bit worried I can't remember what I did in my first version, but I was a little bit worried it might stretch out a bit with the zigzags. It is quite stretchy fabric. So Mariflex was great for finishing it off. So yeah, this is my new Zoe tank. I'm quite pleased to have recreated it. It's got the V at the front and then a sort of more of a scoop round neck at the back. And yeah, I'm definitely going to wear that a lot again this summer. I just find it's quite a nice staple in this colour. And this fabric's really nice and stretchy. I remember when I made my first Zoe tank, I made a sort of wearable toile in like a cotton jersey. I just made this cropped version here because I had quite a limited amount of fabric. It was like an offcut from another project. And it came out, I went with my measurements, but it came out a little bit tight. I think the cotton jersey wasn't the stretchiest, but this fabric is super stretchy. So I think I made the same size again in this tank, and actually the fit's really good. And I think the fit will probably be a bit more forgiving in this fabric because it is so stretchy. So anyway, I thought I'd share that. I'm really glad to have recreated that top because it was a real great staple in my wardrobe last summer. And I was really disappointed when I got that stain on it and I couldn't get it out. So yes, that's what I'm wearing underneath this Freya top in this lovely meat milk tencel modal rib knit fabric. I will link it down below. There are loads of different colours. I do think it works really well for the Zoe tank and the Freya top especially. And then on top, I've got a pinafore dress that I made by hacking another true bias pattern. This one here, the Ogden Cami pattern. It's a bit of an indie classic, this pattern, isn't it? For this woven cami top with this deep V at the front and back and spaghetti straps. And it's got quite a straight fit. There is a larger size range also available that has bust darts and slightly wider shoulder straps too. But yeah, I love hacking this pattern, and I've got two of these pinafore hacks. Basically what I did was crop off the cami at about like an empire length and add on a gathered skirt that comes to just above my knees, and I've added in pockets too. And then I've widened the straps a bit just because I thought a slightly wider strap would suit a pinafore rather than a spaghetti strap, because I thought I'd use it as a pinafore for layering rather than as a summery dress on its own, although I could wear it like that too. And then for the actual body, the actual Ogden cami, you cut for the inside like a shorter little facing on the inside. But for the pinafore, I cut two of the front and back of the same length, and then I sort of turned it under at the inside and sort of slip stitched it in place to make the bodice fully lined, which I think gives quite a nice finish. And I made it, I think I sized up one size of my measurements of the pinafore just to make it a little bit more loose and relaxed, and so I could layer things underneath. And I made it in this really lovely fabric. This is a Mind the Maker viscose twill fabric, and I really love the print on it. I thought it was a bit different. It's quite a large scale print. The actual background colour is, I don't think it's quite a black, it might be like a very dark grey colour possibly. And when I put it against black, it looks slightly different. And it's got all these gold rings on in different sizes, which I really liked. I sort of like the sort of matte gold of them. I had to kind of cut the piece out carefully so that they had a nice placement on the cami and on the straps and things. But I remember quite enjoying that, figuring out where the rings were going to go. So yeah, it's nice, relaxed, easy to wear. When it is a bit loose, you can just pull it on and it's perfect for layering. And I'll put a picture up so you can see what it looks like on. And I'm not sure if this fabric is available to purchase online anywhere still. I'll have a look, and if I can find it in stock anywhere, I'll link it down below. It's got a bit of weight to it, which is quite nice. So I think it works really well as a pinafore dress for layering. Oh, and I also should mention, I did write a blog post about how I hacked the Ogden cami to turn it into a pinafore dress. So I'll link that blog post down below as well in case you fancy having a read. But yes, that is what I'm wearing today. And then the next thing that I wanted to share was, yesterday my daughter brought home from school her reindeer costume that she wore last week, or reindeer onesie that she wore last week in her Christmas performance. And I mentioned before that we sort of embellished it a little bit to turn her into the reindeer Cupid. So I thought I'd show you the actual costume now I've got it back so you can see the sewing. So the first thing I did was, this nose is actually a red nose. So I cut a piece of black cotton jersey fabric that I had in my fabric suitcase and just popped it over the top. I just kind of left the edge raw and I kind of sort of hand stitched it around. I didn't sort of hand stitch too finely because she wanted to be able to take it off afterwards. So I thought it'd make it easier to unpick if I didn't sort of, if I did a bit of a looser stitch. So there is the nose all covered up. I thought it'd be tricky actually to get the right shape than it was because it is a bit squishy, but actually it went on quite well. And then here are the little hearts on her outfit that I added on. So yeah, I kind of just drew a heart shape and turned it into a little piece of pattern paper. So I got them all the same size and shape. And then again, I've stitched them on fairly loosely, so they should be quite easy just to take off with my unpicker. So that's a little job for later, I think, to unpick all of these and then turn it back into a sort of Rudolph with a red nose without any extra hearts on. But yeah, I thought you might like to see the actual costume in the flesh. And then I also thought I'd mention while I was on, a couple of days ago I mentioned about how I hadn't tried knitting any socks to date, but it is something I'd really like to give a go. And a couple of people wrote very encouraging comments saying that socks are really fun to knit and a great kind of portable knitting project as well, because you don't need a lot of yarn and it's quite a small item, so great to take out and about. So I was wondering if any of you had any recommendations for a sort of beginner sock pattern that knits up quite nicely and would be a good first one to try. I've seen some beautiful creations on Instagram that are really detailed, but I kind of want to have a sort of pattern to have a go of that is fairly simple to start with and just feel comfortable that I can kind of figure out how to get the right size. I think that's one of my worries with knitting socks, that I might spend all the time knitting it and it would end up too small or really too big or something. So any great beginner patterns that have got clear sizing and will be a good start, I really appreciate. And also any recommendations of good places to buy sock yarn. It's not something I've really bought much of before. I think I might have bought a small amount to make some little knitted cats a couple of years ago for my children and my niece. It was like bright orange. But yeah, any recommendations for sock knitting and where to start, I would really much appreciate. And then in terms of my plans today, well, I'm hoping to do some more sewing of my DD pullover. I'm going to try and get my sewing machine out now after I finish off here. So what I'll do now is I'll leave you with some footage of a walk that my children and I went on yesterday. After school, when I picked them up, we popped down to the shops and then we thought we'd take a different walk home than we usually go. And it's actually a really lovely walk. It's quite a pretty one. So I took a bit of a video of us walking home and I thought I'd put that in now because I know a few people have mentioned they like to see me getting out and about and see what the area is like around here. So I'll pop that footage in of our walk home yesterday after school, and then I'll catch up with you a little bit later to share how I'm getting on with my DD pullover and what else I've been up to. So I'll see you a little bit later. Bye! So I'm back again now and I hope you enjoyed seeing that footage of our walk home yesterday. It was a really nice walk home. But yes, it's late morning now and the weather has changed quite a lot since when I was on earlier. It was lovely and bright earlier, but after I finished filming, it kind of went all dark overhead. It went very overcast and then it started to rain, and it's rained quite a lot this morning. So that's a bit of a shame because the weather was so nice at the start of the day. But actually I've been inside sewing. I've got my overlocker out and my sewing machine out and I've had a cup of tea. And actually I think sometimes when the weather's bad outside, it's quite nice to be inside doing a bit of sewing and feeling really cosy with the rain sort of coming down out of the window. So yeah, it hasn't been too bad, but it has sort of, I think it's sort of maybe finished now. So hopefully the day's going to improve again. We shall see. But I thought I'd pop on now and share with you how I've been getting on with my DD pullover, because I've been working on that. And I have got the collar in now. So here it is, the main body of the sweatshirt with the collar all inserted. So yeah, I'll open it up so you can see. It's all gone in. So yeah, it went in okay actually, but I did add in a few extra steps to make it a bit of an easier thing to sew in. Yesterday, when I sewed the zip or inserted the zip into the collar, I was going to hand baste the zip in place first before I then sewed the zip on my sewing machine. A few people had recommended that and I thought it was a really good idea. But I totally forgot when I was going through the process of putting the zip in. I think because I don't usually hand baste, and I don't actually usually do a lot of zips, I was just sort of on autopilot and yeah, forgot that stage of the process, but luckily the zip went in okay. But I'll definitely bear in mind hand basting when I'm inserting zips in future, because I think it's a really great plan. But anyway, the zip went in okay, but when I came to attaching the collar to the main sweatshirt, I did do a bit of basting today just to make sure it went smoothly. So the first thing I did was to baste the two sort of collar pieces together before I went to attach it to the sweatshirt, because the way the collar is you kind of have like a front and back of the collar, and then all around the edge that you're going to then attach to the sweatshirt is like two raw edges of the front and the back of the collar. And I was a bit worried if I didn't sort of baste them together first, that when I went to sew them onto the sweatshirt, it might be quite easy for one of those edges to sort of slip out and for me not to catch it when I'm sewing and end up with like a little hole on one side. Particularly because this fabric is very fluffy and so it makes it quite hard to see the raw edges on the sewing machine when you're sewing, because the sort of fluffiness kind of obscures the edges. So it's quite hard to check that you've got all edges caught. So yeah, the first thing I did was to baste around the edge of the two collar pieces, the kind of two sides of the collar together. And I just did that on my machine. I machine basted with like a longer stitch length. I think I used a 4.5 stitch length all the way around the edge, just to make sure then I was kind of just putting two pieces together rather than working with three individual layers of fabric, because I kind of turned the collar two layers into one layer by sort of basting together. So that is the first thing I did, which to make it easier. And then when I came to actually attaching the collar itself to the sweatshirt, I decided to hand baste the collar and the sweatshirt together, because it's quite fiddly actually attaching it. You've got these sort of square corners to navigate around here and then a bit of a curve around here. And I was quite worried that in the process of sewing around the more tricky bits, one layer of fabric might just slip out again and I wouldn't be able to notice it, and I'd end up with a hole and a bit that I hadn't caught. So I decided to hand baste together, and actually it didn't take too long, so it's definitely worth doing. And when I got to actually a point of sewing it on my machine, it meant that it sewed together really nicely and everything was caught nice and neatly. So I'm definitely glad I spent the time doing the hand basting. It meant those tricky areas like that kind of square at the bottom and the kind of curved bits around the neckline were much easier to navigate, because everything was already caught together, so there was no risk of anything slipping out of the way and me missing it. So that's what I did, and I sewed the actual collar to the sweatshirt using my sewing machine rather than my overlocker, just because because it was a little bit of a fiddly one, and I feel like my sewing machine gives that a little bit more control. I quite like it how with my sewing machine I can set it so that if I pause and stop pressing the foot, the needle will land down, so there's no risk of it sort of staying up and me shifting it slightly and everything getting a bit shifted and not following a straight line. And also I think I've got a built-in walking foot on my machine. It's a faff with a built-in walking foot, and that I think helps feed it all through more smoothly as well. So I thought, to be on the safe side, given it was a bit fiddly, I would sew it on my machine and then I'd overlock the edge after I'd got it all sewed together. So that is what I did. So it's all overlocked now as well. And actually the overlocking bit was the trickiest part I found of inserting the collar, just because once you've sort of sewn the bulky fabric all together, you've got the seam that sort of pulls it all together, and then they all sort of fluff out. The raw edges go quite sort of wide. They don't kind of stick together. So when I was overlocking, I actually did a couple of times miss one of the edges and not catch it in the overlocker. When I sort of turned over, I was like, oh no, a little bit hadn't been caught. So I did need to re-go over on the overlocker a couple of bits just to make sure everything was caught. So that was the trickiest thing, I think, because the fabric is quite bulky. It didn't lay nice and flat to go through the overlocker and all feed through. But it is now all caught now. It's all overlocked on the inside, as you can see. So that's given quite a nice finish, and it's definitely needed because this fabric just fluffs everywhere. I've got fluff all over the floor now. I'm going to probably hoover in a little bit once I finish sewing because it has gone everywhere. But it is lovely fabric, just a bit kind of, a bit unruly to work with. But anyway, the collar is all in. I'm really pleased with how that's looking now. So yeah, I think the next step now is to probably insert the sleeves. I think you just insert them on the flats. That should be quite straightforward. So I might try to do that now and then have a little break for lunch. I'm not sure how much more I'll get done after lunch because there's a few other things I want to get on with too. But I thought I'd share with you the collar and how I'd got on with that and how I found it made it easier to sort of insert it. In the instructions, it doesn't mention anything about basting in place, but it definitely was worth doing. So anyway, that's where I've got to now. So I'll leave you now. I think I'm going to do a little bit more sewing, have some lunch, and then I'll pop on in a little bit. So I will see you in a little bit. Bye. So I'm back again. I've had a bit of lunch and done a bit more sewing of my DD pullover, so I thought I'd share where I've got to now on it. So I've now sewn in the sleeves and also the side seams, so it's starting to look a lot more like a sweatshirt now, and I think it's going to be a very cozy sweatshirt. The sleeves and the side seams are really straightforward to sew, much less fiddly than the collar. And I sewed them just using my overlocker rather than my sewing machine and then overlocking the edges, which is nice and simple and gave a really nice finish on one edges of those seams for this sort of faux fur fabric. So the next steps are to add on the bottom band, the hemband and the cuffs. And like I mentioned earlier in Vlogmas, I haven't cut out those pieces yet because I wasn't sure if I might need to widen them a bit just because this fabric isn't very stretchy. So I need to have a little think on that, and I think it's probably a job for tomorrow. So my plans for the rest of the day are need to go and pick up my children from school in a bit, and then we've got a bit of a busy evening because my son's having his hair cut, and then he's also got his last Scouts session of the term. So I'll be sort of ferrying him about and trying to get dinner ready in between. So yes, I think I'll finish off today's video here. So I'll see you again tomorrow for day 13 of Vlogmas. So that takes us past the halfway mark. Can't believe how fast it's gone. I always feel like it starts slow and then really starts to motor, and it really is motoring now. So thank you very much for joining me for another day of Vlogmas, and I'll look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. So yeah, see you tomorrow. Bye.